Welcome back, everybody. This is Eric here with Iraq Veteran 8888. Today, got another Gun Gripe episode for you. I got my good friend here, Mr. Gunsngear, Mike. Great dude, one of my favorite people. He's going to be joining me here as my guest for this particular one. And we are going to be discussing the stopping power myth, okay? A lot of people hear, that term thrown around and they don't really know quite what to make of it. They don't really understand that it is a sort of a trifecta of things that must occur in order for that to really even be a thing or to even make sense. So we're going to dive into that with some of our favorite cartridges. But before we do, you have to stop what you're doing and go subscribe to Mike's channel, Mr. Gunsngear. Check him out on Facebook, over there on the gram for some of our hilarious exchanges. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. That's just good life advice right there. I recommend it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me.
So, yeah, we're going to get into this. Absolutely. So, not all cartridges are made equal. And people throw around this stopping power thing. And there's sort of some formulas that you can use to determine, what a cartridge is in theory capable of doing, right? We have foot-pounds of energy calculations. We can take the bullet. We know how much the bullet weighs. We know how fast it's moving. Therefore, we know how much energy it is generating. But energy calculations are only going to get you part of the way. There are other things to consider, such as bullet construction, many things.
Yep, wounding characteristics.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right.
So we'll kind of start maybe on the 22. Small end, work our way up.
Absolutely. So with the 22, obviously energy's pretty darn low. Depending on the round in the barrel, you're going to get somewhere around 100 foot-pounds of energy. But the 22 is a very lethal round. It's, often underestimated, but it's lethal to people, so you have to treat it as such. So most people use it, though, for like varmint hunting or just target practice, but it has the capability to stop someone, if you will.
Oh, yeah. And I believe, too, that on the 22 front, one interesting point that people need to remember is there's a ton of different bullet designs. There's expanding projectiles, there's fragmenting projectiles, there's tracer projectiles, solids, copper-plated solids, lead solids, subsonic, heavies, lights, 20-grain calibres, you name it. There are so many different varieties of 22, all of which can fulfill a very specific job. And that's what makes a 22 such a versatile rifle to own, especially a little bolt gun with a can or something. You can do a lot with it. And, yes, shot placement is important, right? I mean, how many people have a crazy uncle or grandfather that told you back in the day that they shot plenty of deer with a 22 and killed them? Lots of crazy uncles have said that, right?
Yep.
And we always wonder, okay, is that just bull crap? Was Uncle Jasper just, bragging about that just to do it? The answer, I think, is kind of somewhere in the middle, right? Many hunters would consider it, obviously, it's not only illegal to shoot a deer with a 22 long rifle, many would consider it to be unethical, but when you're growing up in the South, in the sticks, and you're poor, and you're not going to eat otherwise, and all you got is Grandpa's 22 Magnum, well, we're not going to discuss whether or not that is a correct thing to do, but understand that shot placement is extremely important, right? And as we discuss the power levels of all of these cartridges and start kind of going down the line and discussing the differences between rifles and shotguns and handguns, it's important to remember that shot placement will be the end-all, do-all of any cartridge. You can have the most powerful cartridge in the world, but if it grazes the intended target or doesn't hit a vital organ, that target has the potential to still harm you if that's what they're trying to do, or run away. So,
for sure.
Yeah, so we'll get into our first centerfire cartridge. We're going to move up to 9mm.
You like the pointer?
Oh, yeah, I like the bayonet. I got to watch out. I don't want to stab someone with this thing. A Mosin bayonet, that's fine. But we got our 9mm. Popular subgun cartridge, been in use a long time and for good reason. Light recoil, very easy to manage, generous capacity, wide variety of different bullet designs.
Low recoil.
Low recoil, fantastic recoil. And 9mm PCCs have made quite a splash in the recent years.
In the last 5 years, they've blown up, for sure.
Absolutely.
But it's probably the most common pistol caliber in America. So there are a lot of documented shootings with it, right? Both on people and animals. So it gets the job done, again, provided shot placement is there.
That's right. And I love the fact that there's been so many excellent bullet designs that have been came up with for the 9mm, right? 9mm gets a bad rap because, you know, there wasn't always a time where we had these great expanding bullets and really good modern propellants that can push the velocities a little faster without increasing the pressure. So pressure is always going to be a limiting factor to not only a firearm design, but to a cartridge design. So as propellants are advancing, you are able to get better velocity, but with not generating as much pressure. In some cases, we're getting better velocity with less pressure than the lower performing powders we're giving to begin with. So that really puts some of the other smaller cartridges than 9mm, such as 32 ACP and 380 ACP, into a situation where they're more viable for defense now than they ever were because of the increased bullet design, the better bullet designs and the powder choices.
And 9mm really gets a bad rap post 1986, right? The Miami shooting, where it didn't perform well, but those bullets and those powders are obsolete now.
Yep.
What's out there today, it's so much better. So
that's right. So that's
night and day difference.
Important to remember, because as we get down the line here, we're going to step into some murky waters in that regard. So we're going to step up to America's hard hitter, and that is the 45 ACP. 45 ACP is generally a relatively slow cartridge, but uses a heavy bullet. So we're getting into our first slow and dumb cartridge of the group. So there's a paradigm here that exists. If something is lightweight and small, in order to get the wounding and damage potential, you've got to push it faster and faster to get that foot-pounds of energy where you want it, right?
Yeah,
that's why 5.56 is like basically a 22 on steroids. We'll get to that in a second. But when you get something that's heavy, that's moving slow, all right, you're getting somewhere. We're going to get into stuff that's heavy and fast, and that's where you really get interesting. But 45 ACP serves our military, you know, obviously extremely well through, you know, 2 world wars. I mean,
2 world wars.
That's the common thing gets thrown around.
But yeah, no, it performs well terminally. You're going to get similar in terms of stopping power to 9mm with good bullet selection. But capacity is a little bit less because it's a larger case, so that's one thing to think about. And it doesn't do as well against like intermediate barriers like glass and things like that as a 9mm would.
Correct. I'll mention something about 45 as well. In the Thompson, like, you know, during World War II, and you've got a subgun shooting 45 ACP. If we just simply look at these two projectiles, right, a ball round in a 9mm versus a ball round in a 45. Now, this one's got a little bit flatter of a mel pat. You know, the point of this bullet's a little flatter than a ball round you would have seen in World War II. But because of the surface area of the projectile, I know you guys have heard the term, well, a 9mm might expand, but a 45 doesn't shrink. Okay, it is a large bullet. It is a large bullet. So even if it doesn't expand, I think that it's got its good rap and its ability to stop threats up close because of its sheer frontal energy, because you've just got a physically larger projectile.
For sure, and there's states that you can't use hull points in other countries as well. So if that's the case, then that size does matter.
Absolutely. So 45, you know, was created out of a need to defend soldiers and sailors and Marines from doped up enemy combatants. That's why it was created. So, and it did quite well at that. The 38s they were using just weren't cutting it.
No.
Guy would, you know, be doped up on opium and start running at you with a machete in the Pacific, and, you know, they're right in front of you, and what are you going to do? You know, you got to...
Right, 6 rounds with a 38 special with ball ammo. It's a 50-50 shot.
Yeah, this did much better at you know, people up close. As a defensive firearm, 45 ACP, you know, definitely gets its good rap deservingly.
Absolutely,
okay?
It's a good cartridge.
All right, we're going to move on to another one, 44 Magnum. Now, 44 Magnum is cool because this is our first Magnum offering, which, you know, basically you've got a lot more powder than a standard pistol cartridge. But what's cool about 44 Magnum is when you get it in a shorter barrel, it's still pretty amazing. Like out of a 6-inch 44 Mag revolver, you're getting, oh, so great. But where the rubber really meets the road with this cartridge is when you throw it in like a lever action with a 16-inch barrel, and you get a massive velocity gain.
Yep, huge. It's pushing rifle velocities, like Eric just said.
Yeah, 44 Magnum's not a joke. And when I was a young man, maybe 15, 16 years old, the first 2 or 3 deer that I shot in my lifetime, I shot with a 44 Magnum. And I didn't use a revolver, I used a Ruger Deerfield carbine. And most of my shots were between, you know, 90 and maybe 130 yards with a Ruger Deerfield. And it dropped them like a sack of potatoes.
They don't make that gun anymore, do they?
I don't believe so.
I don't think so,
they
yeah.
do two different versions of the Deerfield. Right. One is like a little rotary magazine-fed version, and the early ones use a tubular magazine. That's the one you want. You want the tubular gun. It's a little bit better than the magazine-fed gun, in my humble opinion.
Gotcha.
I digress. All right, we're going to get into our first dedicated rifle cartridge, the ever-popular 5.56. And you and I both have experience with this cartridge in a variety of
sure.
situations.
Yeah, tons. And getting into rifle cartridges, the big difference is going to be velocity. Because bullet weight, for example, in 5.56 is less than, 45 ACP, let's say. But wounding characteristics are just devastating because of the speed. When it hits flesh, water has nowhere to go. So the expansion is just nasty in terms of like a temporary stretch cavity.
Yep. When we look at, let's say, a projectile that is in a standard 22, so this is a 45 grain subsonic projectile. This is what we consider to be a little bit heavy for caliber for a 22. Most of your 22s are 40 grains. But when you look at a standard ball round that might be in a 55 to 62 grain realm in a 5.56, okay? Another area that you get into with a rifle cartridge is also chamber pressure. Okay, that's why there are limitations in gun designs as to which guns can shoot which cartridges. Okay, so obviously, you're talking a good bit more pressure in a rifle cartridge over getting into some of the handgun cartridges. Although I will say, a 44 mag is definitely a high pressure handgun round because it's in the Magnum class. You start lobbing 460 Smith & Wesson Magnum, 500 Magnum, some of the larger big bore.
454.
Yes, you can certainly get into some high pressures in handguns too. But generally, rifle cartridges are going to generate a lot more pressure. This is a 175 grain Match King, loaded up in a Federal gold medal match in a 308.
And that's got an open tip.
This is open tip match.
Right. So that's going to impact how it performs on the target as well. That's another thing to keep in mind. Absolutely.
So with 30 cal, you're definitely stepping up on the, not only the case capacity, you've got a lot more powder here, stepping up to a 7.62 308 class here. And we're sticking primarily with American cartridges here. We are going to get into a few foreign ones. But the 30 cal is great. And I hate to say this, all right, this is going to kill me to say this. It pains me to say this, but with the advent of 6mm Creedmoor, 6.5 Creedmoor, the 308 is always going to have its use because so many guns in our military's MTO are still chambered in it, like our machine guns and stuff, but the 6.5s outclass this by far.
Absolutely, both in terms of flatness when they shoot, as well as terminal performance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Swedes had it right.
Yeah, a long time ago they had it right.
They did. They figured it out, in 1896.
Yep.
When did they start issuing their Mausers? Like 1898 or 99? Yeah,
it was pre-1900.
Yeah, long time ago. The Swedes, they had their 6.5 by 55, and they were one of the first militaries to really truly get it right. The 6.5 by 55 Swedish is still in use, and people hunt moose with them, bear, all kind of large animals. To great effect. I like 308.
I do too.
I enjoy it. But it does, 800 to 1,000 yards, if you've got a good gun, 1,000 yards is about where it tops out.
And if you don't have wind. Wind will push that caliber around a lot. But in terms of lethality versus 5.56, it's definitely a step up, in terms of stopping power.
Especially at the distances, especially in a gunfight, distances where, enemy combatants and soldiers shoot at each other on the battlefield. The 308 is definitely a step up in lethality over the 5.56.
And it's going to do much better in barriers as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Been in use a long time. Been around, so the first war we used 308 in was Nam?
Yes.
Yeah, because in Korea they were still using 1919s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting. So our 30-06, now that's a whole other story. We won't go there, but the 30-06 is no slouch either.
No,
I will mention
not.
Briefly that with the 30-06, you get case capacity in that for reloading purposes that are almost kind of getting into 300 Win Mag territory, which is pretty impressive. All right, now we're going to get into our first mashup here, and this is cool. We've got a 450 Bushmaster, a 458 SOCOM, and a 4570. So how are these cartridges related?
So they're all pretty similar in terms of performance. both the 450 Bushmaster and 458 SOCOM are modern versions of what the 4570 was attempting to do back in the day. So these, of course, are designed for semi-automatic firearms. Generally speaking, the 4570 isn't, but they are hard-hitting calibers, particularly up close. So within 100 yards, they absolutely deliver a lot of energy on target.
Oh, yeah. Back in the day, even with black powder propellants in the 4570, buffalo hunters used their long rifles for great feats of accuracy out to extended ranges. So 4570 has been in use by, hunters and sportsmen and soldiers for a long, long time. 4570 is great, but it doesn't lend itself due to its overall length and its rimmed case to being, fed in a semi-automatic. So that's why you have things like 458 SOCOM and 458 Bushmaster. 450 Bushmaster uses a 452 diameter projectile, so it's a little bit smaller projectile, whereby the 458 SOCOM is a true 458.
Correct. And one thing to note on the Bushmaster as well is that there are certain states that mandate straight wall cartridges. That has it.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, so because the 458 SOCOM is a necked cartridge, it may not be legal in places where they require a straight wall. So there's a lot of needs that get met by certain cartridges and the way they're developed. We see a very similar paradigm in the 350 Legend.
Yeah.
And that's a great cartridge. Oops, and we're making dominoes here.
And just one thing to think about with all three of those calibers is that they drop fast when you get out beyond 100, 150 yards. So they're a close-in caliber for sure.
And you're also talking a heck of a lot of energy. So I'll discuss this paradigm sort of quickly, right? If we take something, I mentioned it earlier, but if we take something lightweight and we get it moving really fast, it's devastating, as Mike said. If we get something heavy and we get it moving fast, it's double devastating.
Absolutely, it is.
Because that weight is a big, big part of it. That takes that energy calculation, right? And really drives it up the wall crazy. When you get something heavy, moving fast, that's when you get into big bore, stopping rifles. And the 4570, ladies and gentlemen, is in my opinion, the entry to that. Okay, you start getting into 458 Winchester Magnum, 458 Lot, some of the larger safari cartridges, where you get big and heavy and it's moving fast as crap, and it is absolutely devastating.
They are. For sure. Okay. One thing to note there too before moving on is like I said, rifle wounding characteristics versus pistol. So there's a sliding scale depending on bullet weight of where that velocity is, but generally speaking, around 2,000 foot-pounds of energy, you tend to get really devastating temporary stretch cavities. You don't see that really with pistols. So
they just don't have the velocity.
They don't.
Maybe a 44 mag on a deer at 50 yards out of a rifle. Yeah. You're going to get into very similar wounding characteristics of what you expect out of a full-blown rifle cartridge. I will mention, too, that not all 4570s are created equal. Okay, so please don't put a modern 4570 load in a trapdoor, an old trapdoor.
You'll only do it once.
You'll only do it once, okay? Do not put a Ruger #1 load in a trapdoor, boys and girls. Okay, we're going to move on to a couple of shotgun rounds. Now, I've got a 410 here. This is a 410 Golden Bear Slug, and this is mainly for size comparison to our 12 gauge here. This is a DUPLEKS broadhead HEXOLIT 32 expanding steel slug.
Yep,
and they are absolutely devastating on game. 12 gauge shotguns, when you talk about just a pure energy dump, shotguns are not really made to shoot super long distances, but what they do in close distance, they do so well that I have become such a proponent for semi-auto shotguns. I absolutely love them. Some people are intimidated by shotguns, and rightly so, because they're generally going to generate more recoil.
For sure.
They're harder to shoot. They're harder to load under stress. They are harder to use. It takes, in my opinion, the most time to master a shotgun than any other gun.
Yeah, but that said, in terms of stopping power, I watch a lot of videos of shootings. I've seen some in person, hunting, etc. In terms of one-shot stop, I think 12 gauge is the most reliable in that. If you put it within chest cavity, people stop shooting. It is what it is.
And animals stop moving.
Yep.
And that's part of it. I mean, 12 gauge been around a long time, and just like the 4570 and other sort of antiquated cartridges that have made their way into the modern world, we wind up seeing situations where, obviously with modern projectile design, such as this wonderful HEXOLIT, and obviously, you know, modern propellants and wads and all of the components that make up a shotgun cartridge have just advanced greatly over the old school black powder paper shells.
The flight control wads today are just awesome in terms of keeping that wad tight.
Yes.
Spread tight, excuse me.
Buckshot is more accurate. Velocities are greater. Patterns are better, right? You know, slugs perform better, right? In the old day, like a Forster style slug that's just like a 1 ounce rifled keyed slug, great slug design. They're wonderful, but they pale in comparison to like some of the offerings from Mrgunsngear and DUPLEKS, and even the modern Federal True Ball slugs shoot way better than a traditional Foster slug. Yep. Absolutely. Great. So the 410 we showed for comparative sake, but I think these are like 90 grain slugs, and they still kick hard. I want to say the energy that these 3-inch slugs are giving out of a 410 shotgun. You might remember the little 14-inch 410 that we put the brace on, did the video on, and we shot a few of these, and they got a little bit of recoil. They kick, and the energy is pretty good, even for a 410. So again, a 410 is a tiny shotgun shell.
I was gonna say, I have a gel test of 410 buckshot on my channel, and the stuff performs. You know, when you get it coming out of a shotgun length barrel, it's delivering a lot of energy for, you know, relatively light recoil compared to the 12 gauge.
Absolutely. So the benefit that you get over a large bore, you know, 12 gauge going down range, it's not, don't think it's a series of diminishing returns, okay? A 20 gauge has a really nice velocity paradigm to weight paradigm in terms of the way that, you know, 20 gauge is a great defensive shotgun.
Agreed.
If you can find defensive ammo in 20. Now, you're going to be a little more limited on 410 and 20 gauge for defensive purposes. The 12 gauge just tends to be sort of the hero because there are so many defensive rounds available in a 12 gauge, and it's sort of become the industry standard, and for good reason. The payload is exceptional. If I take a 1 3/8 ounce slug moving at 1,600, 1,700 feet per second, we are generating, boys and girls, we are generating some energy. Read my lips, energy, energy. Like Terry Crews, power! Like, it's straight up power. That's what it is.
I think in a lot of ways, the modern 12 gauge loadings have made the 10 gauge somewhat obsolete.
Yes, absolutely.
That's probably gonna generate some comments.
Okay, we're gonna move on to one little tiny thing before we go on, and I chose the cartridges for last for a reason. All right, this is a 577 450 Martini Henry. Now, when I show this to people, folks are like, holy crap, that could shoot down a plane. You know, they look at it and they see this big cartridge and this big old projectile, and they think, man, that's got to be the most powerful thing ever. Looks can be deceiving.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
The last paradigm is just because a cartridge is physically large and has a lot of case capacity and a big old honking bullet. Now, granted, again, we get into that paradigm. This cartridge is moving slow, but it's heavy, so that's where it gets its energy. Now, this is black powder only. You don't shoot smokeless out of this. So despite this cartridge being physically large, because it is black powder, it is going to be extremely limited on the amount of power we can physically get out of this cartridge. Okay, there's something to think about. And then likewise, we get into the 50 BMG. What's the silver tip? It's just a
I don't know.
API. I think this is just API.
API.
And I think they're like between 690 grains or so. They're on the heavy end, maybe 650 to 700 grains.
Yep.
And then the AMAXs can get up into 750 grains. All of 50 BMG is a scaled up 30-06. You go from 30 cal to 50 cal. It is a scaled up 30-06. So,
it's a nasty round. It's delivering a lot of energy. It's a great barrier penetrator. I mean, there's not a lot that you would want to stop that a 50 can't stop.
That's king of the hill right there.
It is. It is.
This is the culmination of what I said in that trifecta. Heavy weight, lots of powder behind it, a good strong gun that can handle it, and you've got a recipe for success if what you must do is stop what it is that is in front of you.
Yep.
Man or beast or machine. Or barrier or earth, it will do it.
338 Lapua is a great cartridge as well. Kind of like the you know, the 308 has been outclassed in some ways by the 6 mils. 338 for long distance shooting kind of outclasses the 50 in my opinion. But again, both will do it well. So
I agree. And I think it's also worth mentioning before we let you guys go for the day that Barrett came out with a cartridge called the 416 Barrett. So it's a neck down 50 cal to the 416. Very, very good performance. And it's worth noting our friends at CHEYTAC have their 408 CHEYTAC. So 408 is a completely different animal. We won't go into that. It's almost worth its own episode. We'll get into that in a future video. But 408 for long distance right now, it's like, oh my gosh, it's the king of the hill.
It's awesome. Yeah. One thing to note too on the 416 is that if you live in California, you can own it.
Bingo.
So most guns that are chambered in 50, they make versions in 416 for folks in California.
That was Barrett's sort of middle finger to California.
That's why it was designed.
Yeah, and I have a lot of respect for Ronnie Barrett and their family for doing that. It cost them probably a metric ton of money to develop the cartridge, to semi-spec the cartridge, to test the rifles, the R&D. Trust me, it's not cheap to field, you know, design a gun like a Barrett in a different cartridge. Now, I'm maybe a little selfish. I would love to see a 107 or similar type of action in 408 CHEYTAC.
Oh, yeah. That would be interesting.
Yes, sir. And on that note, we're going to let you guys go. Now, there's tons of cartridges. These are not all of them, but we wanted to sort of discuss some of our viewpoints on stopping power and the myth of stopping power. And to kind of bring this whole point together for the end of the video, there is definitely a multifaceted aspect to what a cartridge can do. You must have good shot placement. You must hit a vital organ. You must have a cartridge that is capable of hunting whatever your game might be it two-legged game or four-legged or no shoulders or more than 8 legs or 8 legs. Doesn't matter what your game might be. You choose an appropriate cartridge that is designed to do the job, and you provide a proper shot, and you're generally going to come away looking pretty good.
Yep. No, I agree. If you have those 3 things, it'll generally work out.
Absolutely. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in to today's video. We hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned a little bit of something. I know we got a lot of new gun owners out there. This is all basic knowledge, guys. You got to know this stuff. This is part of being a gun owner, is understanding these are the tools of the trade, and the cartridges are just, imagine having a car that could take like 1 million different types of gas, and whatever gas you put in your vehicle would determine how it performed. That's kind of like choosing a cartridge, right? Yep. You know, you don't go squirrel hunting with this.
You could.
Well, there are videos of people shooting groundhogs with these.
Yeah,
I digress.
There's not going to be much left.
But you also wouldn't go buffalo hunting with this.
Yep.
So there are different cartridges for different purposes. Guys, go and subscribe to Mike, Mrgunsngear here. Great dude. One of my favorite YouTubers. I'm glad he's here with me today. And we really appreciate the support. Go over to Ballistic Ink. Pick yourself up a snazzy t-shirt. We'd greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Have a great day. Mike, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it. Many more videos on the way. See you next time.